Friends, welcome to the 2023 Backhouse Lecture. My name's Mark McLeod, and Robin and I, as co-clerks, on behalf of Tasmania Regional Meeting, welcome you. We also wish to thank the Friends School, Nelson File and his colleagues for providing this wonderful facility and the technical assistance to be able to have tonight's lecture online. This evening, we'll be hearing from John Watts about Quakers, the internet, and what's next. For those who are new to Quakers, the Backhouse Lecture is the annual lecture of the Religious Society of Friends in Australia. Backhouse Lectures began in 1964, when Australia Yearly Meeting of the Religious Society of Friends was first established. The lecture is named after James Backhouse, who travelled from England with his companion, George Washington Walker, throughout the Australian colonies from 1832 to 1838. Backhouse and Walker planned to record their observations and make recommendations for positive change where needed. Their reports made recommendations for legislative reform. Many of the changes they initiated resulted in improvements to the health and well-being of convicts, First Nations people, and the general population. A naturalist and botanist, James Backhouse is remembered also for his detailed accounts of native vegetation, which were later published. Australian Friends hope that these lectures, which reflect the experiences and ongoing concerns of Friends, may offer fresh insight and be a source of inspiration. And so, friends, to tonight's lecturer. This has been a long time coming. This has been a 3-year wait, and it seems like a generation ago that I was part of the Backhouse Lecture Committee that was so excited about inviting John to join us. And then a couple of waves of illness got in the way, and here he is at last. John Watts is a Quaker songwriter and multimedia artist. As a songwriter, he has toured the world sharing stories of the early Friends and his own spiritual journey growing up Quaker in Virginia and attending the Quaker Leadership Scholars Program at Guildford College. John's unique success promoting his music in the early days of YouTube led him to found his Quaker Speak project, for which he spent 6 years travelling, interviewing friends, and publishing a video every week. In 2021, John embarked on a new journey, envisioning a future for Friends and online media. John Watts is a member of Central Philadelphia Monthly Meeting, which holds his ministry under its care. He lives in Germantown, where he enjoys hiking in the Wissahickon with his wife and recording music in his home studio. As is our usual practice, friends, the Backhouse Lecture is conducted in the manner of Friends, beginning and ending in silence without applause. So I now invite with great pleasure John to begin when he's ready.
So as Mark shared, this has been a long time coming. First started the conversation about this journey to come be with you nearly 4 years ago. The Backhouse Lecture Committee reached out to me in 2019, and I enthusiastically agreed to be the 2020 Backhouse Lecturer. And as we all know, one way to make God laugh is to make plans in 2020. So a lot has changed since I first got that invitation. A lot has changed in my life. A lot has changed in the yearly meeting. A lot has changed for us as a society. But that's okay. My talk in 2020 was going to be about change. So let's talk about change. That seems to be the constant in the 21st century. And it's escalating. So let's talk about change. I want to share with you about this, this moment in my life when I realized that things were changing in our society. And I had an epiphany. It was because I made a silly video and I put it online. And then over 100,000 people watched it. It was 2009. The video was to promote a music video, a song that I had written about growing up Quaker. And the idea for the music video was it was a Quaker meeting for worship. We were all sitting in silence. I stood up out of the silence and started giving this song as my ministry. Then someone starts tapping their foot. Someone else stands up and starts playing the trumpet. Someone starts drumming. And before you know it, it turns into a full-on dance party. So I uploaded that to a brand new platform in 2009 called YouTube. I don't know if you've heard of it. And I called it Dance Party Erupts in Quaker Meeting for Worship. And a few days later, I came back from a camping trip to find that I had an inbox full of emails from Quakers all over the world in places that I didn't even know that there were Quakers at the time. And a comment section full of Quakers arguing about theology. And there was this third type of person who was commenting on this video, who had found it. They had been passed on this video by a friend, or they had Googled something. And that type of person was someone who was saying, oh, this Quaker thing looks pretty cool. I'd like to try it out. Well, I had to respond, of course. You know, not every Quaker meeting ends in a dance party. But maybe more of them could. So I want to rewind a little bit. I was born in 1983. My parents had just joined Quakerism. They both grew up Catholic in the deep South. They moved away from Catholicism. They moved up to Virginia, and they attended a Quaker wedding. They fell in love so hard with Quakerism that they bought a piece of property with other people from the meeting and started an intentional community. So I grew up in this intentional community of 6 families, all of whom were Quaker, and they conducted all their business and all of their decisions as a community based on Quaker practice. I grew up in Baltimore Yearly Meeting, which has a rich youth program and a rich summer camp program, and I was just in love with my Quaker communities growing up. We worshiped in silence, as I'm sure you're familiar with. I remember our first day school, our religious education was all about world religions. I learned a lot about different world religions and probably something about George Fox. I don't remember a lot of theology in my upbringing. So when it came time to choose a college, a university, there was one thing that I was really clear about, and it's that I wanted to continue this thread in my life. I wanted more of this Quaker community. So I chose Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, because it had a really strong Quaker program called the Quaker Leadership Scholars Program. Now, little did I know at the time, but the founder and director of the Quaker Leadership Scholars Program, a man named Max Carter, who's got a long Quaker beard and a straw hat, and he rides his bicycle around campus. He grew up in a totally different kind of Quakerism than I did. That was influenced by holiness evangelical movements in the Midwest of the United States. And he was part of this much more Christian tradition than the Quakerism that I grew up with and understood. And so little did I know this, but when I joined the Quaker Leadership Scholars Program, I was joining a program that was all about Quakers in different branches from different backgrounds encountering each other. So if you can imagine, I'm an 18-year-old. I'm going to college to get more of this experience that I had with my peers of games of wink and cuddle puddles. I don't know if you have any of this stuff in Australia, but this is the youth group stuff that I grew up with. And the first thing that we do in the Quaker Leadership Scholars Program is we go on a field trip to an evangelical friends church. All right, so I'm used to sitting in a circle in silence for an hour. Instead, there's a pastor at the front of the room, there's a pulpit, there's a big cross, there's a Christian flag and an American flag, and a sermon. So I had some questions after that experience. Not least of which, what is Quakerism? I certainly questioned whether I was a Quaker because my Quakerism was so different from theirs. I definitely questioned their Quakerism. And looking back on that experience, I realized that it was a crisis of faith for me. I realized that the Quakerism that I grew up with was just a piece of the pie, was just a piece of the puzzle. And as many young people do, I stepped back from the religion for a little while, took a break. When I came back, I was in a powerful place. I didn't know it at the time, but we have this idea as friends of getting low, of being humbled, of knowing that I don't know. What can happen when I know that I don't know? So I went to Max Carter and I said, tell me the stories of early friends. I want to understand where this thing came from. And if anyone here knows anything about Max Carter, I don't know that he's ever been to Australia, but I've made a lot of videos with Max, so you might have seen him on the internet. Max has been waiting his whole life for a student to approach him and ask him to tell them the stories of early Quakers. So he told me the stories of George Fox and of Margaret Fell. He told me some stories that challenged me and that kind of blew my mind. I was a singer-songwriter at the time. And so the ways that I processed these stories was to write songs about them. I wrote a song about George Fox. And then I started writing songs about these more challenging stories. I heard the story of James Naylor, the Quaker who rode some say it was a donkey, but I think it was a horse into the city of Bristol in a reenactment of Jesus's entry into Jerusalem, and was arrested and tried in front of Parliament. So why did he do that? Why risk everything for that? I heard this other story of a fellow named Solomon Eccles. Solomon Eccles was a musician and a composer in the 17th century. And if you were a musician, it meant that you participated in the Baroque culture of, frilly wigs and horse-drawn carriages. And Quakers didn't believe in that kind of musical expression. So when Solomon Eccles became a Quaker, he took all of his instruments and his manuscripts and he burned them in a public square in London. So as a musician, it seemed like the only appropriate response to that was to write a song about it, which I did. When I graduated from Guilford, I had this experience of not just hearing these stories about early friends, but trying to tell them. And I felt that they had integrated themselves into my life. So I started traveling and sharing these songs that I wrote. And Quakers on the East Coast started inviting me to come and share the songs. And I started writing more songs about my own experience. Someone challenged me to write a song about growing up Quaker, what my own experience was. So I took a crack at it. I wanted to make it fun because growing up Quaker was really fun. But I also was wrestling with this theological difference in Quakers that I experienced in college. And I was wrestling with these stories of early friends. So I want to share this, at least the beginning of this video with you. This is a song called Friend Speaks My Mind. It's the one that I wrote and recorded in 2009 and released the music video called Dance Party Erupts in Quaker Meeting for Worship.
Quakers when I was just a kid, and now I'm studying them. I hope you know how that is. I got George Fox on my right, James Naylor's on my left, and Margaret Fell is holding us together. Give her some respect. It's that first generation we look back to find out what being a friend means through and through. I don't fully understand it, I don't know if I can, but I understand enough to know that I am a fan. I'm like, damn, I didn't think that I would do this anymore. I got bored listening to lectures, felt like a chore, but now I'm begging Max Carter just to tell me some more. Oh Lord. So when I heard this Christian stuff, I get uncomfortable a lot. I'm like, what does Jesus have to do with George Fox? And when I heard the word Christ, it would make my jaw drop. But now I kinda understand the man. I got a soft spot. I'm not a Christian, but I'm a Quaker. I got Christ's inner light, but he's not my savior. I'm on a date to meet my maker. I got down at young friends with some funky behavior. Listen up. Now I'm a liberal friend, that means FGC and tons of other acronyms that set me free. And I've been running the gambit from Quaker camps and sandwiches with the young friends crew. I know we offend you, but yo, we're Quaker like the rest of y'all. Just cause we go to bed later doesn't mean that midnight isn't Quaker. And yo, I'm sorry like everybody that Quakers had to split, but just don't blame Elias Hicks for all our problems. We're this society of friends, it's time we acted like it and start to work together just to try and solve them. So all you friends in the meeting house, put your hands up and then twist them at the wrist like you just got out of handcuffs and clap for me. You gotta clap silently, that's how you clap for me. You gotta clap silently, I'm not a Christian, but I'm a Quaker. I got Christ in a light, but he's not my savior. On a date to meet my maker. I got down at young friends with some funky behavior. Listen, I found George Fox living in a journal and it's fertile. I'm learning, I mean, I jumped a lot of hurdles and done a lot of discerning just to get to where I'm sure that the ancestors are working for certain. Met the spirit in person, now living my life, nurture and worship. One more time. Okay, I found George Fox living in a journal and it's fertile. I'm learning, I mean, I jumped a lot of hurdles and done a lot of discerning just to get to where I'm sure that the ancestors are working for certain. Met the spirit in person, now living my life, nurture and worship. In certain circles, there's a focus on service. Now I know you might say, well, that's a backwards theology. I know you might say, well, that's not right. But that's the way that I grew up, and it's the way that I'm presenting it. Let's hold all our differences in the light. Alright, I'm not a Christian, but I'm a Quaker. I got Christ in a light, but he's not my savior. On a date to meet my maker. I got down at young friends with some funky behavior. Came to Richmond Friends meeting, Friends speaks my mind. To BYM, Friends speaks my mind. Go to FGC, Friends speaks my mind. And down to Guilford College, Friends speaks my mind. Out with QLSP, Friends speaks my mind. Up to Pendle Hill, Friends speaks my mind. Out to Earlham College, Friends speaks my mind. Out to Shiloh Quaker Camp, Friends speaks my mind. In Kentucky and Opecking, Friends speaks my mind. Out to FCNL, Friends speaks my mind. To the AMSC, Friends speaks my mind. And out to Langley Hill, Friends speaks my mind. To Friendship Friends meeting, Friends shakes my mind. To Ashland Vineyard, Friends speaks my mind.
So just to repeat that chorus for you. I'm not a Christian, but I'm a Quaker. I've got Christ's inner light, but he's not my savior. I'm on a date to meet my maker. I got down at young friends with some funky behavior. So that's the video that goes viral. I had written hundreds of songs up until that point. That's the one. And if you know Quakers around the world, we have opinions. And particularly those lines in the song brought out a lot of different opinions. One of the really interesting through lines in those opinions was an ignorance of each other. I heard a lot of Quakers saying, I've never met a Quaker who believes anything remotely like that. And then there were these comments responding to those comments saying, those are the only kinds of Quakers I've ever met who believe in something like that. Where are you from? So I realized something in that moment, hearing both people who agreed with that statement and didn't know any Quakerism other than that, people who fundamentally disagreed with that statement and had never heard of a Quaker like that, and then people who watched that video and said, Quakerism looks pretty cool. I realized that we're encountering each other. This new technology is enabling us to encounter each other, for better or for worse. Across theological lines, across geographic lines. And it's enabling other people to encounter us in ways that were never possible before. So that started working on me in 2009. I thought about these stories of early friends and the things that they deeply believed in and the spiritual courage that they had in the world to go and confront the society as it is and invite it into something deeper, something more real, something more just. And so I had this idea. If this platform is so powerful, if anyone in the world can access a video that a Quaker made on YouTube, then why does it have to be only me that has this superpower? Why don't we tell our stories all over the world? So the idea that I had was for a weekly Quaker YouTube channel. It would be just interviews with friends about their stories. And little did I know that by having that idea and pitching it around to different organizations in the United States, that I would end up fundamentally changing my life and many lives of friends and seekers who I've met in my travels since then. For 6 years, starting in 2014, I released a video every week with a different Quaker or a different idea that I interviewed a bunch of Quakers for. I did a bunch of research about what people are Googling about us. So we made a video about whether Quakers are Amish or not. Many people want to know, are Quakers Christian? What do Quakers believe? And I find those questions, even though they're the most challenging questions you can ask a Quaker, to be a doorway. People are asking that because they want to know. And that's what they know to ask. So how can we answer that in a way that's an invitation, that's deeply grounded and rooted in our tradition? And then I was faced with this other question. What is our tradition? How can we answer any of these questions for all Quakers? You know, the joke is that you ask 10 Quakers something and you get 11 answers. Right. So my rule was always, let's get 11 Quakers on there. But as I traveled around and spoke with Quakers of all different stripes, different backgrounds, different theologies, I came across this one thing over and over again. And it started to emerge in my practice of doing this project. I wasn't a videographer when I started out. I wasn't an interviewer. In fact, I knew very little about professionally interviewing people. And if you can imagine, the first time I set up all these cameras and lights and put a microphone on someone and then said, okay, do something amazing. You know, it's a challenging situation for anyone to have a microphone and have lights on them and have two cameras pointed at them and then try and answer a question faithfully. So I started digging deep into my Quaker practice, my Quaker training, and realizing that every moment is an opportunity for something sacred to happen. That every word that we speak could be the most powerful word that we've spoken. But we have to be ready for that. We have to prepare for that. We have to join each other in being ready for that. And so I started treating this thing that I was doing, this interviewing Quakers, as a ministry, as holding them in the light, holding them in prayer as they were speaking. And I realized that even though, you know, we were releasing a video every week, so sometimes this week's video would disagree with last week's video. We had all sorts of different kinds of Quakers on there. But the project was still successful, even if it wasn't always coherent theologically or narratively. It has nearly 5 million views now. And wherever I go, inevitably someone comes up to me and says, you know, I was on a spiritual journey to find my community. And I found your videos online, and now I'm, you know, whatever, the clerk of my meeting or whatever they got roped into. That was a joke. But I realized that this type of speaking, this type of listening, it's something we're really good at as friends when we try and we sit and we wait and we speak the words that come to us when we wait. That's a powerful gift. It's something that the world is hungry for. So I want to play you one of those videos from this YouTube channel that I started.
Based on my limited understanding, we are amazingly powerful. whether we get it or not. We are extremely powerful. And often we feel powerless. Anywhere from depression to anxiety to whatever, we are feelers. When I listen, when I really listen, I am listening to hear God speak. I am listening for God's voice, God's signal. What that means to me is the signal that moves me to aliveness, the signal that allows me to feel the fullness. And when I speak, I am not frivolous with my words because I recognize that my words are power. Henceforth, Christ was known as the Word of God. Because my judgment is he truly understood the power of word, the power of speaking. So I listen so that I know where I am, where I don't want to be, what's possible, to be touched, called, formed. And when I speak knowing that I'm working with God's power. And that when I speak, I want to speak in a way that facilitates healing, that facilitates blessing, that facilitates wholeness, that facilitates creative possibility for integration. My concern is we don't listen to each other. And it creates the world we see. It creates the world we experience. People not being heard, not being seen, not being appreciated, not being valued, not being recognized. People not being recognized for that of God that dwells within them, not seen, not recognized, not reclaimed and embraced, wholeheartedly embraced. And so we fragment, we become broken because we are not seen for who we really are. And so the body breaks. It just breaks. The positive news, that's the sad news. That's the sad news. So how about some happy news? The happy news is at any point in time, we can take our power back. We can fine tune, rehone, calibrate our capacity to hear and recognize each other. And so my belief is there's a way of listening. And Quakers have this conversation, this belief or this sentence, listening each other into wholeness. That we have the capacity to listen each other into wholeness. And we can take that back at any point in time and feel the richness of deep listening, where our heart is actually touched. Deep listening and deep speaking.
So on the one hand, we have this superpower as Quakers of deep listening that can transform us. It can transform the people that we're listening to. And we have this brand new communication technology. You know, when I was a kid, we had this really exciting new thing called dial-up internet. Here's how it worked, right? You take your computer and you plug it into the phone, which is in the wall. And then your computer can type things back and forth with people from a different continent until your mom needs to use the phone. now we have these devices in our pockets that allow us to be in contact at any moment. We have YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and Twitter. And it's all equally emboldening and confounding. There's these incredible challenges with this new technology and this incredible opportunity. So what do we do with a powerful leading and a clear spiritual conviction and brand new communication technology? As with everything that challenges me and confounds me and unlocks our power as friends, I decided to consult the stories of early Quakers. The printing press was not brand new in the 1650s. It had been around, but suddenly everyone had access to it. And there are some remarkable similarities to present day. The society was in upheaval. The government was in disarray. People were looking for alternatives to the church. And they thought the apocalypse was right around the corner. Does any of that sound familiar? And there was this brand new communication technology that only the kids understood. So I recently got to speak with a historian on the topic. For the past couple of years, I've been leading up to this moment. And if I'm a little discombobulated today, I apologize. Last week I was in Colorado. The week before that, I was in Costa Rica. The week before that, I got married. And the week before that, I launched this project that I've been working on for the past 2 years. So it's been quite a month for me. I will never forget this month in my life, and I appreciate you all being a part of it. But this organization that I just launched is a Quaker media organization. Its whole goal is to wrestle with these questions that we're talking about today. It's called The Quaker Project. It's a play on words. The, of course, has 2 E's, thee and thou. Yeah. And what we just launched is a weekly regular Quaker podcast. So it's called The Quaker Podcast, and it's sort of in the style of, some of the great podcasts out there, Radio Lab or This American Life, if you're a podcast listener. And you should be. It's an amazing medium. So I got to fulfill a years-long dream for one of our first episodes on this podcast. I got to speak to a historian of Quakers and the printing press. Her name is Dr. Kate Peters. She's a historian in England. And I just want to play for you a little bit of that episode. The episode is called Quakers and the Internet. If you want to get your message out in the world today, you've got to post it somewhere on Twitter or Facebook, whatever. But if you want to get your message out in the 1600s, you print a pamphlet.
They're a bit like the internet now, in that something happens, somebody can write a pamphlet about it, you can have it circulated within a few days, sometimes within a few hours. and they're very light. They travel across the country very quickly, and that's what people said about the Quakers, that their pamphlets are flying as thick as moths up and down the country, that they're everywhere.
Today, we're talking about communication, specifically how Quakers have embraced modern forms of communication in the past, and how friends struggling to find a place in the age of the internet might take some cues from the 17th century. So that was one thing that I learned from Kate Peters, was that early Quakers were prolific in their use of the printing press. Unapologetically prolific. I learned a couple other things in that conversation that I want to share with you briefly. I also recommend that you go and look up that episode because it has really informed my thinking about this new communication technology. So the other two things that Kate Peters taught me, one of them is this fact that Quakers were young people. In the 1650s, they were 18, 19, 20. And their prolific use of the printing press as brand new technology confounded their elders. They took to it quickly. They understood it. Like a young person today might understand TikTok or Twitter in a way that, I mean, I just turned 40. I'm already an internet dinosaur. I don't understand TikTok. I'll admit it here and now. So the other thing that Kate Peters taught me about the early Quakers and the printing press was that they fundamentally understood their printing to be an extension of their vocal ministry. That their listening in a Quaker meeting for worship, for the Spirit to move them, to stand up and speak, just as we do on Sunday morning, that same Spirit could lead one to write and to publish. And in fact, did all the time. So I want to take a moment here to be clear that I'm not saying that all Quakers everywhere should suddenly take up an internet ministry. As Quakers, we understand that we each have a different measure of light, that we each have a different leading, and that we're all supposed to be as faithful to that measure of light as we can be. So for my part, I know that we're just scratching the surface of what's possible. As I travel around the country, and now as I travel around the world, and I talk to friends and I talk to seekers who have discovered my work in the past, or maybe watched one of those videos or listened to a podcast, I hear so much potential there. I want to tell you about one more of the videos that I recorded for the Quaker Speak project. It's with a fellow named Jay O'Hara. Jay lives in the New England area of the United States, and in his home in Cape Cod, he's looking across the bay at the largest coal burning power plant in New England. It's called Bainton Point Power Plant. And he sees these shipments come in every day with tens of thousands of tons of coal that he sees them burning. And as a Quaker, he feels a leading to do something, anything. So he sits with friends in his meeting, and he has a clearness committee. And the clearness that he comes to what Jay ends up doing with one other friend from his meeting is he borrows a tiny lobster boat, and he drives the lobster boat out into the bay, right in the path of the oncoming shipment of coal. And he drops an anchor that's too heavy for him to pull back up himself, and flies a flag that says coal is stupid or something like that. When I spoke to Jay about this story, he said, in that moment, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I knew I was probably going to get arrested. I didn't know if it was going to have any impact. But he said, I did know one thing, which is that this was what the Spirit was calling me to do. I had tested it with my meeting. And so he did it boldly, he did it unapologetically, and he did it without knowing the outcome. So indeed, the coal shipment came, they had to stop so that they didn't run over this tiny lobster boat. The Coast Guard had to come out. It took a bunch of people to pull up the anchor, so they slowed down one day's shipment of coal. They were arrested. And when the day came for the district attorney to arraign them and give them their charges, several months later, instead of charging them, the district attorney came out and said, you know, I don't think that we should be burning coal in New England, and dropped the charges. It was the beginning of a series of protests at the Baton Point power plant that escalated and escalated, and 2 years later, they shut their doors. When I travel and I talk to young people about my work and about the videos of mine that they've seen, that's always the first one on the tip of their tongue. One of the things that we've been doing for the podcast, which is really a treat for me, is that when someone leaves us a Facebook message or emails us and says, oh, I just discovered you guys, and here's something about my Quaker journey, I just call them. I give them a call and I say, you know, tell me more. I want to hear about your story. And I want to play with for you just briefly one of those calls.
Hey, John.
Hey, Aaron. Thanks for taking a second to talk with me.
Yeah, for sure.
So you and I have been in touch a lot recently because we're working together on the Intermountain Yearly Meeting gathering in Colorado this summer. And at some point in that process, you mentioned that you were relatively new to Quakerism and that my work had played some role in that. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I first went to a Quaker meeting in November of 2021. And before that, I was part of a very, very conservative, fundamental, evangelical Christian church. Yeah. And my partner was not. We were trying to figure out how to mesh our beliefs together. And he asked me to go to a Quaker meeting with him. So I opened my heart a little bit to the thoughts of Quakerism, but I didn't know if I felt comfortable going to an actual meeting with people. So I started looking on the internet about, what is Quakerism? And very quickly I found Quaker Speak.
Yeah, the video project that I started in 2013.
Yes. I remember very specifically the first one that I watched was Are Quakers Christian? And there was an interview that said in Quakerism, there are no lay people because we all have God in us. And I thought that was a really beautiful sentiment. This really started kind of opening my eyes to that the Quakers each have their own faith and that was okay, and that the group as a whole was not purposed to change my faith or tell me what to believe, but that rather it was a guide to help learn how to live in this, I think the video might have even called it a dynamic spiritual presence, where we're focused on community and we're focused on helping people in the world right now. That's what convinced me to go to a meeting. And so I went to my first meeting and at Mountain View Friends meeting with my partner. We heard some of I think it was the Peace and Social Justice Committee. They stood up and they said, there was a recent shooting at a Jewish synagogue, and that Mountain View was looking for people to volunteer to go stand outside of a Jewish synagogue on one of their upcoming holy days, because they needed a peaceful, nonviolent presence so that the Jewish people could go and worship in peace. And that just sealed the deal.
Thank you so much, Erin. Appreciate you doing this spontaneously.
My pleasure, John. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, you too. See you.
Bye-bye.
So friends, I just want to share this one last thought with you tonight and leave you with this. There are so many people in the world who are hungry for spiritual community, who are hungry for spiritual depth, who are just hungry for quiet and deep listening. The more we offer that with open hands and open hearts to the world, the more we cultivate it ourselves, the stronger we'll be as a religious society of friends, and the stronger we'll be as people. I feel fully committed in my life and my ministry and my work to realizing that possibility in my own way. And I want to encourage you to do that same thing in your own way. Whatever the Spirit is calling you to do. Sit with friends, listen deeply, go boldly. Thank you. Just a little addendum here. I'm going to be traveling for the next week. It's been such a lovely joy to visit with friends in Melbourne and now in Hobart. I'll be in Canberra for the next couple of days, and then I'll be visiting with Sydney friends for the week after that. So folks on Zoom, I hope to meet some of you in person. I look forward to talking with you And even if we don't get to meet in person, I hope that you'll keep in touch. I'm going to drop a link in the Zoom thing to our little subscription page for the project that I've just started, and would love to keep in touch with you. Thanks so much for having me.
This would have been wonderful 4 years ago, but there's an absolute rightness about you delivering this lecture and this message tonight, which I know has been deeply heard by friends. I want to thank you on behalf of all of us gathered here and all those who will read and see this in the future for the inspiring message, for your story of your own journey. Also want to thank you for a demonstration of grace under pressure. I mean, and I think other people in this room and on Zoom would be thinking the same. How would I have handled that? And it was just, again, an inspiring demonstration of Quaker process at its best, in my opinion. And finally, I want to thank you. There are many words that I could take away from tonight and will think about deeply, as will others. But one that just keeps sounding in my head is your observation that every moment is a potentially sacred moment. So thank you for sharing these insights with us, for giving us so much to take away and reflect on deeply. I'd like to remind friends that there will be an opportunity to reflect on John's lecture by Zoom on Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And details, including the Zoom link, are in the yearly meeting timetable. And John will join that session from Silver Wattle and Canberra. A printed version of this lecture will be available in coming weeks. So I would like to say thank you now. Good night to all of those who are joining us online, and invite those who are here with us in Hobart this evening to stay for light refreshments. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you to Friends School for hosting this and for assisting us so wonderfully tonight. And again, John, thanks and go well.